understanding that my wisdom, my understanding is so limited, so incorrect. That's why God, when Job, is suffering for some time, God doesn't take away his suffering. God reveals to Job the creation and makes Job's mind probe, ponder, and praise. And what is Job? He ends with saying, well, I had heard of you. Now my eyes see you, and I repent in dust and ashes. Then, last week, just a quick review, I think we have 4 of these comparisons. Am I right? Mm-hmm. All right, thank you for being there. And if you weren't here last week, this is to help you along. The Hebrew model, which is the biblical model, which comes out of why the Hebrew learned, focuses on inspiring awe and worship. And one of you talked to me after the class last week, and I really appreciate that. I need your input because, I'm a teacher and always talking about teaching. But this individual says, you know what you're saying is absolutely right, but it's got to be applied to every one of our lives, no matter what you're doing. And so, if you are you're cutting onions, how would you be inspiring awe in your thinking by cutting an onion? You're recording silence, right, Benjamin?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
Okay.
How do you cut onions standing in awe of God? Kelly?
Well, for me, I would focus on the fact that I always think it's so neat that you can plant a seed and that it grows and God provides food that way. And so I would be thankful and awe-inspired about how he created the world in order to be able to grow food for us to live on.
I love your answer. We eat onions. Today we ate chicken, right? Yeah. Now, when you think about that, God knew that we were going to eat chicken. When did he know that? Kendon?
Since before creation.
You are a good student. So, that chicken, we don't know how old it was. But that chicken hatched and that chicken grew and that chicken was prepared by God for you and me to eat tonight. Think about that. And that chicken had a mom and dad. And all the meat that you eat, stand in awe of God and say, God, wow, you have this prepared. Thank you, Kelly. Anybody else want to say something about cutting onions? Need.
Just amazed by how this thing can make you actually cry when it comes here.
Yeah.
I don't know how that works, but yeah, it's really amazing.
I love your answer. You know what? When you cut an onion and you lay it open, you are seeing something nobody has ever seen before, only you. Right? And you see all the layers and how it is made, huh? Wow. By the word of the Lord. How do you farm standing in awe of God? I think I have 3, 4 farmers sitting here, so that should be a very popular answer. Kendon.
The ability to provide for people and being thankful for God for the land and the acreage that you could plant seeds on, which pop up.
That's an amazing answer, Kendon. This is God's soil. Nikki, I think your hand was going to come up.
I was going to say, the farmer plants the seed, but he doesn't make it grow. And God provides the rain. We had a dry spell for a while, and we just got a nice inch of rain, and get things going again. So, I mean, like I said, we can plant it, but we can't make it grow. God does that in His own time. He provides the rain and the sun and.
I love that answer. I'm assuming you're all hearing these. Rich,
Okay, so I'm just kind of amazed that we can plant perhaps 30 pounds of seed corn in the soil and it can produce 200 times 56 pounds of produce, 3 pounds per acre.
we stand in awe of God, don't we?
The seasons are one thing for me too, is that the seasons come and go, they're the same year after year, it's predictable. And just about every time, we have something, a crop. And it also goes back into livestock, how perfect does it meet every animal that's born that we eat? How many things that have to go just perfect each and every time for that piglet or cow to be born at that time? That's amazing to me that how that's designed, that even with babies being born, how perfect everything has to be at that moment at birth. To be born, go from mom's dependency into living on their own. It's just snap one finger and everything changes and it looks perfect just like that.
Ivan, I'm really impressed with your answer. Me, Ivan is a pig farmer. Big, I mean, a large group of pigs, actually. But when you're talking about the pig, you know, we are knit together in our mother's womb. So is that pig. Me, you had some more to say?
Yeah, related to farming, like how, like, you know, I'm not a farmer, but God takes care of the whole world. Like, you know, but I don't know how people, like, in the process of growing food and stuff, but it's just amazing how God keeps everything running and just like, yeah, it's amazing. Even like, I know that farmers, I don't know much about farmers, but I'm guessing that sometimes they struggle, sometimes the food dies, but God just, I don't know, he does.
We love your answers. And by the way, those who have not met me is a nephew of Benjamin. Nee comes from the Bronx. And he's living in a community that has far more houses than the Bronx. It's called Peoria, Iowa. Because every house, every dwelling place there is an apartment. Really appreciate your contributions. So, this is how you and I think. We are standing in awe of God. We worship God, not just on Sunday, but it's every day, all the time. The Greek model of understanding and manipulating and controlling. There is no honoring God. There's no worshiping of God. There's no looking at what has God done. That's divorced from all of this learning. And I was talking to a couple of you, was it last week or this morning? I don't know when it was, that Madeline O'Hare, did we talk about her last week? She really was effective in removing God from the classroom. And I think we're also very effective at removing God from what we're doing, what we're looking at, what we're dealing with. Because I can become so involved in how I'm going to be successful, how I'm going to make money out of this. And so the goal isn't standing in awe of God and worshiping God. The goal is how much more can I put in my pocket. That can be a very wrong direction to go. Secondly, we had this one, the Hebrew model measures its success by the awe and worship coming from the mouths of her students. Now here, there's this classroom. But right now, this classroom, I really appreciate the words that came out of your mouth. You are thinking biblically. You're thinking God-centered. We look at the very same raspberries, at the very same corn, at the very same onion, but we stand in awe of God and we speak that. We say, look what God has done. Come and see the work of God. And so if you're involved in a school, then I'm going to say this. What is coming from the mouths of our students is their awe Is there worship in the way they are speaking about the things that we are talking about? And I believe it has to first of all come from me as a teacher, and that's how we encourage others to think. The Greek model, it measures success by how equipped students are to compete in the world. Are you ready to compete? You have to be smarter than everybody else. You must surpass everybody else. And so our goal with the Greek model is the highest scores we can possibly get for our students, for our classroom. And when we see, well, look at our scores, we are really successful. Well, if your model is students are very intelligent, you're going to be successful. If your goal is that my students, myself, is going to stand in awe and worship God, then how much knowledge they have, we really want them to learn a lot. We're not opposed to that, but we are always going back to the worship and awe of God. All right? Number 3, it focuses on teaching wisdom. And what is wisdom? Kendon?
Knowing God.
That is a very, very good answer. Anybody want to enrich that answer? Need.
The fear of God.
I didn't hear that well.
The fear of God.
The fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. Knowing God, fearing God, you're both right. Anybody else want to enrich those two answers? It's also knowing what is right and doing what is right. And that comes from knowing God. What does the Greek model focus on?
Knowledge.
Just knowledge. And we talked about last week, having knowledge without wisdom makes us a very dangerous individual. The more a person knows, if they are foolish, they can use all of that knowledge to be destructive. Number 4, the teachers focus on shaping students' hearts. How do you and I get to someone's heart? How do we get to a person's heart? Abby?
Through the mind.
Through the mind. You are correct. You girls, somebody told you, you know how to get to a man's heart is through his stomach, right? You just cook them a pretty good meal, and then you're going to get to their heart. But when we talk to, you and I cannot touch the heart. The heart is God's place where His Word works, but we can teach the mind. And the mind, transformed, is going to touch their heart. What does the Greek model focus on? Kendi,
Shaping the student's mind.
you are right. Not the heart, but the mind. Now, we're going to go to the number 5. This is new for everybody. And the Hebrew model, students are shaped to become like their teachers. How many of you are teachers? I don't think you understand yourself. How many of you are teachers? Every one of us is a teacher. Because we're talking. We're setting example. We cannot not be a teacher. We talk about, formal teachers. But every one of us is a teacher. By how we act, by how we speak, how we spend our time, how we spend our money. All of that is instructive to others. We are shaped to become like our teachers. It's called imitators. The Apostle Paul, what did he say about imitating? Need.
Correct. Be imitator of me, even as I am imitator of Christ. I know God without the rest.
You hit the nail on the head. Paul says, you imitate me because I imitate Jesus. Be like me. That is so amazing. I remember I was working for, well, I think I can say it, Harry Boonder. A lot of you knew Harry Boonder once upon a time, right? I used to work for him by the hour before I went to college, and he had his oldest son, I think it was Steve, but it was a snowy day, and Harry had left the house and walked to one of his hog houses, and pretty soon here's Steve. And Steve said, Dad, I knew where you are because I walked in your footsteps. And Harry was so touched by that, because he said, that's more than physical, it's spiritual. He's imitating me, and so I think that's very, very important. How I live my life is going to either, bring people to God, or it's going to turn them away. Jesus said the same thing, John 10:27, my sheep follow me. And so I think that's rather natural that we follow our teacher. Your teacher could be your parents. Your teacher could be other significant people in your life. And so we become like our teacher. That's the goal. I think that's the goal of parenting. That's the goal as a congregation. How do we model the Christian life? The Greek model, how would that be different? It's very similar. But students are required to reiterate. Reiterate means speak back. Say what their teachers know. We have a word for that. It's called indoctrination. The goal is everyone in the Greek model, we're going to make you in the mold. You know what cookie cutters are, right? And if you got a cookie cutter the shape of a rooster, then you just got all these cookie cutters, and we want all of you students, you must think this way. You must reiterate what we teach you, and we do not give them freedom to think, but we indoctrinate them. Number 6. The Hebrew model prepares her disciples to serve God and their neighbors, their service. In your life, I tell a lot of you, I just say, you really inspire me. You really strengthen me. You really encourage me. Because I need your modeling as you need my modeling, and we need each other's modeling. You just being here is just really strengthens me. You serve. I think we serve in many ways that we don't really know. But serving means, and I help you, I understand that Joy, Rosa, and so on, that family really needs a lot of help with things for the expenses they have going to Iowa City and providing food and all of that stuff. So how do I serve? How do I serve God? How do I serve my neighbor? And you see it on the Facebook. There are some people have some really wonderful Facebook pages. And they just say, have you ever thought that you are God's answer to prayer? Somebody has prayed for help, direction, whatever, and you are the one that God has prepared for that. I think there's another way that you can look, and that's the Greek model. Prepares her disciples to serve themselves. You are the most important person in the world. That's the culture that we live in today. Yourself, your feelings, your desires. You should express yourself, and we should all congratulate you and celebrate with you whatever gender you want to be, whatever alternative lifestyle you want to live, and whether you want to identify as a cat or whatever, we're to celebrate that, because the self is the whole focus of our present culture in this country. And it gets really close to home. Because I think so often we approach something and we have this opportunity, but we ask the question, what's in it for me? How is this going to benefit me? You know, does this fit in with my schedule? And I think there's another problem here too when we're talking about serving ourselves, is that we have this great American dream. I'm going to work for so many years and then I'm going to retire and I'm going to bask in my retirement. I don't think I'm looking at that kind of people here. But that's really the measure. John Piper preached a very effective sermon. John Piper is a Reformed Baptist in Minneapolis. He's retired. But he preached a sermon on don't waste your life. Did you ever, you heard it, I think, right? Or have you not? Where he talks about two old ladies, they're in their 80s, they're missionaries in Africa, and they're driving their car in the mountains, and they ran off of the road, and they are plunged down a deep ravine, and they're dead. Wasted life. Then he talks about a couple from Wisconsin. They retired in their 50s and they sold everything and they went down to Florida, bought a condo and a yacht, and they collect seashells. Wasted life?
Yes.
I would say that's a wasted life. How do I serve? When there is a need, and I'm healthy enough, I'm strong enough, and I'm given the ability to be able to serve. On what grounds do you say no to that? That's my question. How can I serve? And Jesus says, whoever wants to save his life, you're going to lose it. And whoever lays down his life is going to have it life. And I think most of you know this. You have the greatest joy when you are serving. Not for profit, you're just serving. You are being a blessing to people. And that doesn't apply just to classrooms. I think that applies to how we live, how we look at things that God presents to us. How do I minister to these people? How do I serve God? Because God blesses people through his church. Abram is said, and God said, Abram, I will bless you. And I think that blessing is all covered in the Hebrew model. And he says, I will bless you, and you will be a blessing. You're going to be my blessing in the world. Any reaction, any comment you want to say? You agree with that? Yeah, I just find I'm disappointed sometimes when, well, this person would really be a blessing in this school, be a real blessing in this church, be a real blessing in this organization, and then they say, well, yeah, too many gravel roads, I just can't do that. Yeah. Me?
I really love the verse that you use, because I never thought about us like losing ourselves as the best way that we can share with other people.
Say that again, Mike.
I never thought us like losing ourselves is the best way that I can share with other people. Because I'm just thinking like, if I'm sharing with other people and it's not how God wants me to, then it's not really sharing them again, because like it's not giving God the glory. So like I really never thought about that word. Like, it's really, yeah.
For me, you have a very biblical view. You have a transformed mind. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Number 7. Teaches her disciples to trust God in all things. All of us are teachers. We show by our example, by our words, by how we worry about things, how we discuss things. Our children, our acquaintances, I'm just going to talk congregation, our community, they know where our trust is. Do I trust God, or do I trust my pension, my Social Security, my government, my skills, or my neighbors, or whatever? Trusting God means we don't worry. Am I right? Be not anxious in anything, but in everything, by prayer and thanksgiving, to God, the peace of God will be yours. And so I'm visiting now Sandy and Dennis McDaniel almost every day. They're in Pella Hospital, and so if you go to the hospital, just come to Pella, okay? I can come and see you really quickly and easily. And Dennis and Sandy McDaniel, they are members of Tracy Church. And he's got bladder cancer, and she's had a broken hip now for over a month. But you go there, they're not angry, they're not blaming God for anything. Dennis says, I know God is with me, and he's not worried. When you visit saints, you get that wonderful trust. Your mother-in-law, Janet Menal, same thing. I asked Janet, she died a couple of weeks ago. I says, Janet, how are you? She says, what a day that will be. When my Jesus I will see. And so, that's the joy of visiting saints. They don't drain you. They don't empty you out. They strengthen you because they are trusting in God. What would be the Greek mind?
Trust in self.
The answers that I heard are perfect. You just trust yourself. You're going to be okay. I can make it. Or you trust man. If we just get the right individuals in political, positions, if we just get this arranged, we're going to be just fine. Well, there's some truth to, people that are in charge of certain things. But since there is no God in the Greek model, you can't turn to God and say, okay, we're going to trust the living God who is sovereign over all things, and he has my life and the whole world already planned and written in the scroll that Jesus has opened. Well, if you don't have that, what are your alternatives? It's yourself, or this thing called Mother Nature, right? What's Mother Nature?
God.
Say that again?
God.
Okay. It's just pure luck from my situation. And have you ever noticed Mother Nature never gets blamed? God gets blamed. God gets cursed. But Mother Nature, she gets off the hook. I find that amazing. Number 8. Sees minds as clay to be molded. The mind is made in the image of God. Romans 1 speaks about the mind, that everybody knows God. That's why they get so upset when you bring God into your conversation. They are reminded of what they are trying to suppress. They don't want to think about God, but God is right there and they know it. And so you and I see the mind of children, of adults, as minds that are made in the image of God. They have different skill, they have different interests, they have different goals in their life. But every mind needs to be molded, needs to be shaped. But they have the knowledge of God already. Why have we found in every culture, all over the world, there is worship? When Cortez came from Spain, and he finds the Aztec Indians, and they're worshiping. And the Inca Indians are worshiping. Every place in South America we have found a tribe, there's worship. How do you explain that worship characterizes every culture? What's its origin?
God.
It is the evidence. Thank you, Jen. It's the evidence that man is made in the image of God. And our souls are restless until we find God. I should say it differently, until he finds us. And so in Romans 1, if I reject God, I replace God with an image, with a God of my own thinking. The minds we see, they are made in the image of God and they need to be molded. The Greek model sees minds as empty jars, and we're just going to fill you full of all of this knowledge, this indoctrination. We're just going to squeeze as much into your mind as possible, because we want you to follow us. There is freedom in the Hebrew model. Every time, if you hear a sermon or whatever, you see that, how that applies to your life. I always enjoy, sometimes people say to me, well, I really was blessed by that, what you said, and then they'll tell me what I said, but I don't think I said it. But in their world, in their mind, this answered something they had been wrestling with, thinking about. And I just really find that amazing, that all of us in the same class, in the same situation, you're going to find different reactions. Number 9, unifies knowledge in integrated units. I still think this applies to every one of us. When you went to school, you had math, right? And then you had reading. And then you had history. And then you had science. And then you had spelling. Then you had penmanship or whatever. And so you have all these separate units. The unified unit, integrated unit, takes one subject, and you can either do that with history or you can do that with science in the classroom. And so history becomes the core subject. All your literature is connected to history. If you're talking about the Civil War, Civil War, we'll go there, then you're going to read a biography on Abraham Lincoln. You're going to be reading about Lee and so on. You're going to have your spelling words are going to come out of the history unit. Your research is going to be related to the history unit, because a history book hasn't enough room for all of the things that you could be studying. And then you're going to tie in speaking, you're going to tie in scripture with that, but it's unified. And you can tie math in with that too. If you're working with, averages or something, you can make all of these things and just say, well, look at how these different battles and so on and so forth. And so everything is separate. And so what you studied in history has no relationship to what you're studying in literature, which has no relationship to your spelling words, which has no relationship to your math, which has no relationship to your research, which has no relationship to your public speaking. Because we have teachers, and this teacher is the English teacher, and this one is the science teacher, and this one is the history teacher, and it takes a lot of work. But even in your thinking, and Ivan, I think you really introduced this to us this evening, because you're saying, well, when I look at these pigs, I just think, look at all the things that have to happen. Somebody else talked about corn. Who was that? Was that Ivan also?
No.
Rich.
That was Rich. That is called unified knowledge. And really, there is nothing that you can separate in your life and divorce it from everything else. I don't know, you all, when you've got, many of you are married, you remember where you first met your wife or your husband? Yeah. How did you get there? How come you met her there or him there? It just all works together, right? I just find that amazing. Yeah, I could tell you more about that, but anyway, that I'm going to stop. Everything that you work with, just imagine, we talked about chicken a bit ago. That chicken had to be, had to be hatched, had to be conceived in that egg. All of that has to happen together. There's got to be food for that chicken. Got to be water for that chicken. That chicken has to be protected throughout its life so that it's going to live and mature so you can eat it. That really makes you and me stand in awe of God. Number 10. Intends to produce a child whose loyalty and identity remains with his or her family, making him or her an asset to the family. I believe the Hebrew school, and that Hebrew school can be a home school. The Hebrew school can be a Christian school. The Hebrew model intends that the mind, the child we are teaching, is going to be loyal to your family, to your instruction. They are going to love to be with you. They're going to see in you wisdom. They're going to see in you knowledge. They're going to see in you, this is the family I want to be part of because my family is a blessing to me. What do you think the Greek model? Kendon.
Teaching humans to be loyalty to themselves and to their...
This will come as no surprise to you. The Greek school intends to produce a citizen who finds his or her identity as an individual. They are not teaching loyalty to the family. They're not teaching loyalty to a group of individuals that you belong to. But they want you, or want their child, their adult, loyal to the state, making him or her an asset to the state's ideals. And you can, instead of state, you can talk about ideology. And so that, as you see now with all of this CRT, critical race theory, and as you see all of this promotion of transgenderism, their intent is that individuals are going to remain individuals. They're not going to support your family. They're not going to be loyal to your family. They are going to teach them, reject what your parents are teaching you, listen to what we are teaching. And I think one of the advantages that we've had from COVID is that the online teaching that has been going on, many, many parents throughout this country have become aware that what the school is teaching is in direct conflict to what I expect from my family, from my children. And so the Hebrew model honors parents, honors the family. The Hebrew model teaches there are absolutes. What are absolutes?
Things that are true, unwavering the truth.
Correct. There are things that are absolute truths. Give me an example. Need.
God exists.
That's an absolute. Thank you. Kendon.
That when you plant a corn seed, it doesn't become a bean seed or it doesn't become a radish.
You sound like you're not an evolutionist. Those are covenants. The 10 Commandments are absolutes. That was, I believe, the foundation of all of our law. It's built on the absolutes of the 10 Commandments. What's the Greek model? Kendon?
Teaches the opposite of absolutes.
You're pretty good at that. There are no absolutes. What is the word that's the opposite of absolutes? Need.
Is this subjective?
Subjective. Means it's up to you. You determine what's right. You determine what's wrong. It's also another word you can use is relativity. You know, it's all relative. Well, if you're in that situation, you'd probably do that too. And so today we live in this. And this is why we're such a divided country, I believe, because there are no absolutes. Everyone does what's right in their own eyes. When did that happen before?
Oh.
Before the flood. See, and it's violent. It is, you read it in 2 Timothy in the latter days. They're going to be, lovers of themselves, lovers of pleasure. Well, the Greek model leads to that. I see that it is after 7. Do you want to stop here now? Is that okay? Or do you... you stop? Is that okay? Everybody? Yeah, and we will pick this up. And by the way, next week I intend to get into the kangaroo thing here. I want to apply all of this to thinking about kangaroos. If you want to get a head start, on page 6 and 7, in the first blank, you should write true or false without reading anything. What do you know about kangaroos? All right? And I think we're going to have fun looking at the kangaroos. Let us pray together. Our Father, we thank you and praise you that you give us wisdom, you give us understanding, that you bless us like you blessed Abraham with knowing you, putting a fear of you in our hearts, so that what we say, what we do, how we live, is always to honor you and glorify you and praise you. May you transform our minds so that in our work in this week, we are mindful of your word, what your word does, what your word upholds, what you delight in,